Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I am going to be going over all of the spoilers for Zendikar Rising that have come out today being September 8th. So today is the last major day of spoilers, and what that means is that most of the, or at least probably all of the rares and mythics are going to be spoiled. There are going to be a few cards that were not, and those will be released tomorrow when their image gallery is fully updated. However, today is not the last day of spoilers, it's just the last day of Zendikar Rising spoilers. Tomorrow we are getting spoilers on the list for Zendikar Rising and the Commander deck precon, so I'll be doing a video covering both of those and the remaining spoilers that, if any, are released later today. I will be releasing those tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. I just thought I'd let you all know that this is basically the final day of main set spoilers. Why don't we jump right into this? Starting off, we have Smite the Monstrous. It's a 4-cost white instant. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. This one is a very basic card. Again, looking at commons, you really want to just look at them from a limited perspective. And in limited, this is pretty good. I mean, the things that are going to kill you in limited are oftentimes the really big creatures. And we have seen a lot of creatures that do get bigger and ways to make them bigger with either +1/+1 counters or landfall triggers. So this may be able to even hit those creatures that are under 4 power because their opponent boosts them up. So I actually like the card. It's a bit overcosted, but in limited it should be pretty good. Next we have Fischl Retreat. It's a 4-cost white enchantment with landfall. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. Create a 2/2 white cat beast creature token, or put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. So you can either go super wide, or if you already went super wide and you need to go big, you can then go super wide and super big. And so it's this dynamic of once you have enough creatures, you can then start putting counters. And if you can dump multiple lands per turn, this becomes really good. And honestly, this is probably one of the more powerful landfall and abilities. Now, on itself, if you play this on curve, meaning turn 4, it's an enchantment that does nothing. But if you play it turn 5, then you play this, and then you play your land for turn, you get a 2/2 for 4, and so that's like at least a little bit of value. So I think this is probably one of the better landfall cards, and I actually really like it. If I get enough of them from my pool, I will be definitely making a deck around maybe a white landfall, even though generally I think most landfall decks are going to fall in the Gruul colors. Next we have Negate. This is a very classic spell. It did need to be reprinted here, otherwise it would be rotating out of standard. However, it does have some brand new art, and I think it is pretty awesome. It was last reprinted in Core Set 2020, and yeah, it's just nice to see it return. Next we have Skyclave Squid. Either way, it's a 2-cost blue creature squid, 3/2 with Defender, and landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it can attack this turn as though it didn't have Defender. So you're paying, you're getting a 3/2 for 2 in blue, with the downside of you have to play a land every turn in order for it to attack. I mean, I'd rather just have a 2/2 for 2 in blue, which, I mean, they don't have that many of, but I'd rather have that, or maybe even like a 1/1 for 2 that flies. Just the fact that it's so difficult, and I mean, so basically every third turn this can attack, and is that extra, like, power really worth it? Not really, in my opinion, so I think it is pretty meh. Next we have Deliberate. It's a 2-cost blue instant, scry 2, then draw a card. So this is a in most situations, worse Omen of the Sea, in the fact that it doesn't stick around and add blue devotion. It's not something that you can scry with later, but it is interesting. It's another card draw spell, and it is, I believe, either Ponder or Preordain is this spell, but only cost 1. I'm not sure. I'm forgetting at this moment. But yeah, it is a powerful effect. I think Opt is still better, but it does theoretically let you go 3 cards deep for 2 mana, although I would almost rather play Anticipate to let me actually go 3 cards deep and see all of them. So yeah, not my favorite card, but not awful. Next we have Bein Veil. It's a 2-cost blue instant. Creatures your opponents control get -2/-0 until end turn, and then it enters as a tapped land. I think this is a pretty good, dual land. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about the power level of these dual lands and saying that the land is bad and the spell is bad. Why would I ever play this? And that's just because, again, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, it depends on how you're playing these cards. Are they a land that has an added effect, or are they a spell that can, in an emergency, be a land? And this one, I think, is definitely going to be included in more decks as a land. Obviously it is a pretty bad land, but it is a land that, in a worst case scenario, it can kind of save you. For instance, if you're about to die die to a swarm of creatures, and you didn't really want to use your land, but you can just pay 2 and boom, save yourself. So I think these modal spells, especially ones that have like save yourself abilities, are going to be pretty awesome. But yeah, I definitely like these, and I think they're going to be a lot more powerful than people are thinking right now. Next we have Roost of Drakes. It's a 1-cost blue enchantment with kicker 3. As it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, create a 2/2, and whenever you cast a kick spell, create a 2/2. And by the way, the 2/2s have flying. Okay, so essentially this is a payoff for kicker that only costs 1, which is nice. It also has kicker that kind of lets it trigger itself. I think it's a good card if you're running a Kicker Tribal deck, but I don't really see those being super relevant. So if for some reason Kicker Tribal does become relevant, this is probably a key part of that, but generally, you know, paying 4 for an enchantment and a 2/2 is not amazing, but it's not awful as well. Being able to just cast kick spells, the only issue is a lot of the kicker spells that we've seen are very expensive on the kicker side. It's not like, oh, just 1 or 2 extra, get a small extra effect. It's generally a lot more, so that does lean against its favor. Next, we have Master of the Winds. It's a 2 blue creature Sphinx Wizard 1/4 with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards and then discard a card, so it's going to kind of replace itself in your hand, which is always nice. And then whenever you cast an instant, sorcery, or wizard, you may have Master of Winds base power and toughness become 4/1 or 1/4 until end of turn. So you can kind of swap around power and toughness as you see fit whenever you cast instant, sorceries, and wizards. I think this is a pretty awesome card, but unfortunately that effect is you're going to use it like one time, and your opponent knows you can use it, so that means they're going to like play around it as well. So I think it could lead to some interesting gameplay, but I'm not sure how powerful it'll be. I don't know if this is good enough to go into something like an Is It Prowess deck. Next we have Glasspool Mimic, and it's a 3-cost blue creature shapeshifter rogue. You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature you control, except it's a shapeshifter rogue in addition to its other types. I actually think, by the way, then it can also come in tapped and add for blue. I actually think this is probably one of the better cards because, well, in my opinion, Glasspool Mimic is not overcosted. Generally, they make the spell on the left cost like 1 extra, but here I really don't see that. I think a average like mirror image is this is mirror image, except it also can be played as a land. So I think this is probably a better card, and I enjoy it. I enjoy copy effects. There are lots of awesome things you can do with it, but yeah, let me know what you guys think about this card. I'm interested to see. Next we have Ghastly Gloom Hunter. It's a 2-cost black creature zombie bat with flying and lifelink, 1/1, but if you kick it for 4, meaning you're paying 6 mana, it enters with 2+1/+1 counters on it. So you can get a 2 mana 1/1 flying lifelinker, or a 6 mana flying 3/3 lifelinker, and neither of those are really great rates. I mean, a 2-cost 1/1 lifelinker isn't awful, but yeah, not a big fan of this. Next we have Shadow's Verdict. It's a 5-cost black sorcery. Exile all creatures and planeswalkers with CMC 3 or less from the battlefield, and all creatures and planeswalker cards with converter mana cost 3 or less from all graveyards. So first off, this gets rid of Uro, it gets rid of Kroxa, it gets rid of lots of annoying threats. This is essentially replacing Ritual of Soot. Now, Ritual of Soot destroys all creatures with CMC 3 or less. How is this one upgraded? First, it exiles, which could be a bad thing if your deck cares about your creatures being in the graveyard. It also hits planeswalkers now, so you can deal with your pesky, I don't know, there aren't that many Royal Scions or whatever. And then it also is going to exile things from graveyards, which is nice for dealing with things like Uro. I think this card will definitely see play, at least in sideboards, just because it is so versatile at taking out lots of things. It'll be good against the Is It Prowess deck. A lot of those play really cheap creatures. It'll be good against mono red. It'll be good against anything that runs Uro. I just like it, and I think it'll be sideboarded in a decent amount. Next we have Skyclave Shade. It's a 2-cost black creature shade, 3/1 with kicker 3, and it can't block. So you're getting a 3/1 for 2 with that can't block. Now it looks like it should be flying, but it's not. If Skyclave was kicked, it enters the battlefield, 2+1/+1 counters on it, and then if you whenever you play a land, if it is in your graveyard and it's your turn, you may cast it from your graveyard. So it's a kind of card that can just keep coming back, and because you're casting it from your graveyard instead of bringing it out, essentially what that means is you can actually pay its kicker cost if you want. So this is a repeatable kicker effect, and I think it's really interesting how, it's not just bring it back to hand, bring it back to battlefield, you actually get to cast it, which I think could have some implications. Overall, I like the card. Not sure how powerful it is, but reoccurring creatures are generally pretty good. And, you know, assuming that a third of your deck is lands, you're not drawing extra cards, and you're not ramping a lot using lands, then this will basically be able to be revived every third turn on average. Next, we have Null Priest of Oblivion. It's a 2-cost black creature vampire cleric 2/1 with kicker 4, and it has menace and lifelink. Pretty nice. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. I mean, a 2/1 menacing lifelinker for 2 is okay. Obviously, the kicker is kind of nice, but again, you're paying 6 mana for a 2/1 menace lifelinker and a revive spell that, you know, it does go straight to the battlefield, so okay, it's just a little bit overcosted for a normal revive spell, and you get the body, but I would just rather play a typical revive spell or something like Blood and Bones, Blood for Bones, which I believe is rotating out actually, but I would rather just play a typical resurrection spell over this. Next, we have Agadeem's Awakening. It's X black for a sorcery, and it says return from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creature cards that each have a different converted mana cost of X or less. So if you pay 5 into X, you've paid 8 mana, and you can return a CMC 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 card from your graveyard and creature card to the battlefield. Okay, I think this is probably one of the more powerful, you know, ones of these lands. I think the blue one is probably the worst just because drawing a bunch of cards for 7 mana really isn't that great. I think white may come, or I think red is next, then white, then green, and I think this one's the most powerful. I mean, yes, for 4 mana, at its low end, it's not great. You know, for 4 mana, you're resurrecting something with CMC 1 or less, but think about it like this. If you were to, say, make this not a... I don't know. If you were to make this not a, like, an X spell, and you made it just like the other ones where it costs CMC 7, look at it for paying 7 mana. 4 black, return up to any number of target creature cards that each have different CMC X or less. So, theoretically, you could be returning a 0 cost, a 1 cost, a 2 cost, and a 3 cost, and a 4 cost from your graveyard to the battlefield for 7 mana, and that is pretty actually on curve and powerful, and I think it actually is a pretty good effect. So yeah, I think this is probably the best of the both lands. Next, we have Sizzling Barrage. It's a 2-cost red instant. It deals 4 damage to target creature that blocked this turn. Not a big fan of it. I mean, they're already willing to kind of put it in danger by blocking with it, so, you know, it's obviously not that great. So I would rather just, you know, deal damage to anything. Next, we have Scavenged Blade, 2-cost red artifact equipment. When it enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature, because every equipment has done that so far. And then equipped creature gets +2/+0, and then you can equip it for 3. So it's essentially an aura that doesn't instantly die when it comes off. It's not awful, but +2/+0 for 2 mana is not great. Next, we have Tuck Rubble for it. It's a 3-cost red creature wall 0/3 with defender and reach, and creatures you control have haste. So it's a giving all your creatures haste for 3 mana at common. This honestly feels more like an uncommon to me, but yeah, be on the lookout for this in limited. This could be a pretty dangerous threat. It doesn't do a lot of blocking, but it does block flyers, which is nice. Next, we have Fireblade Charger. It's a 1-cost red creature goblin warrior 1/1, and as long as it's equipped, it has haste. So you have to be able to equip it the turn it comes out, otherwise that's kind of useless. But when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So you're definitely going to want to equip this, enchant it, whatever, so it has a big power, and then if it does happen to die, your opponent loses. Not loses, but it, you know, takes a lot of damage. So it is a little bit of a setup, and I don't think it'll be meta, but I think it could be interesting. Next, we have Thundering Rebuke. It's a 2-cost red sorcery, and it says it deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalkers. So this is kind of replacing Lava Coil, except this one can hit planeswalkers, and it doesn't exile. I think that losing the exile is actually a pretty big deal, but yeah, it's an okay card. Wouldn't be surprised if someone tries to play it, but probably not in anything meta. Next, we have Territorials, Scythe Cat. It's a 3-cost green creature cat 2/1 with trample, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it's just going to get bigger as the game goes on. Pretty just generic and good card for landfall in limited. Strength of Celerity, it's a green sorcery. Choose target creature you control, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature in your party. So if you don't have any creatures in your party, this is a 1-cost do nothing. I think the party mechanic is severely underpowered, and I really hope it gets a power up with, you know, the D&D set that's coming out, Forgotten Realms. Next we have Vastwood Fortification, 1 cost, green instant, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and then it's a land that enters tapped. So if you're in a deck that cares about +1/+1 counters or proliferating, this is probably a good land. Good land. Otherwise, it's just kind of meh. You do need enough, creatures obviously to make this worth it. But then again, if you don't like it, you can always play it as a land. So I don't know. I like the card. I like most of the modal cards. Next, we have Kazandu Mammoth. It's a 3 cost green creature elephant. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Again, we're seeing another version of this effect, which means that in Limited, I expect there to be kind of an archetype around it, where it's like, oh, enter lands, and lands enter, they get boosted, so on and so forth. Next, we have Kazandu Valley. It's a land. It enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap to add green. Both pretty good cards. In a landfall deck, you're definitely going to want to run these creature lands because, hey, if you need the landfall trigger more than you need the creature, you can do that. So, yeah, I think this will actually be played in any landfall decks. Next, we have Oran, Reef, or Ooze. It's a 3 cost green creature ooze, and when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature with a +1/+1 counter on it. So, yeah, if you can put counters on your stuff and then attack, he's going to make them really big. It is pretty powerful, but it does require it to attack, which means that pretty much anything you want to boost needs to be already safe to attack, which means you're not in that desperate of a need to boost it. So that is somewhat of a fundamental problem with the card, but generally it's okay. Then we have Ancient Green Warden. This is another mythic. It's a 6 cost 5/7 with reach, and it says you may play lands from your graveyard, which is already a very powerful effect with things like Field of Ruin and Fabled Passage that are both currently in standard and will allow for lots of landfall triggers. And then it says if a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So this is the top end for a landfall deck. It doubles your landfall triggers. It is going to let you replay your lands that are going to double your land drops every turn. It's just going to be insane. This card is pretty awesome. Next, we have Soaring, Thought Thief. It's a blue and a black for a creature, human rogue, 1/3 with flying and flash. And as long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in your graveyard, rogues you control get +1/+0. So they're not always going to get that boost, but if you can mill them enough, they will get it. And whenever 1 or more rogues you control attacks, each opponent mills 2 cards. So you're going to really quickly get up to there. And it is a flash spell, which means it has pseudo haste. I actually think this is a pretty good card and may see play in a lot of different rogue decks, if those exist. Then we have Kargan War Leader, 3 costs, red and white, creature, human, warrior, 3/3, and it says other warriors you control get +1/+1. Pretty good in a warrior deck. You'll run it there. Everywhere else, obviously, you won't. Next, we have gracmaw, Skyclave Ravager, 3 cost, a legendary creature, Hydra Horror. It enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever another creature you control dies, if it had a +1/+1 counter on it, put a +1/+1 counter on gracmaw. So whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, put a counter on it. On gracmaw, sorry. And then when gracmaw dies, you're going to create an XX Hydra token, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on gracmaw. Okay, so you're kind of have to kill this thing twice, but once you kill it once, it won't continue to grow. It's interesting. Maybe it'll be the head of a Golgari counters deck in like Brawl, but I'm not sure. It's not that great. Next, we have Relic Golem, 3 cost artifact creature, Golem, 6/6, and it can't attack or block unless an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, and then you can pay 2 and tap, and target player mills 2 cards. So a 3 cost 6/6 is pretty good. If you have anything that cares about the power of your creatures, this will be really helpful. And getting someone to mill 8 is not that hard, especially when Relic Golem himself can help. So yeah, I would not be surprised if this sees some play in a mill deck, obviously. We have cards that for 2 mana can mill someone for 8. So yeah. Next we have Relic Vial. It's a 3 cost artifact. Pay 2, tap, sack a creature, draw a card. Just pretty generic, not good enough because you do have to pay mana, but it is okay. I mean, maybe in a cleric deck, because of the second ability, as long as you have a cleric, it says whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Specifically note that this says whenever a creature you control dies, not whenever a cleric. You only need the cleric to actually give it the ability, so I think that's kind of interesting. Next, we have Base Camp. It enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap to add colorless. Then you can tap to add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a cleric, a rogue, a warrior, or a wizard spell, or to activate an ability of one of those creature types. So, yeah, if you're running a party deck, you are probably running this land. It will help, but yeah, I'm not sure how viable party decks will really be. Alrighty guys, those are all the spoilers from today. I want to know what you guys think about them in the comments down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.